Go ahead and begin. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm Jessica Winger, the Program Manager for ClimateCAP. And we're just thrilled to have you with us today as we discuss the MBA Founder's Journey from Business School to Climate Startup. We have an incredible group of speakers today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation with Krish, Meghan, and Adelaide. So thank you to those of you who are joining us live and those who will be watching the recording of this in the coming days. We're really excited to jump into our conversation shortly, but I'm just going to take a minute to introduce ClimateCAP since we have a number of attendees who are new to the organization. Here's a quick snapshot of ClimateCAP more broadly. We were founded with the mission to prepare tomorrow's business leaders, that's you all, today MBAs, to understand and respond to the climate challenge by mainstreaming the climate conversation in business schools. ClimateCAP was founded and continues to be led by us here at Fuqua, but we are a global partnership of 49 business schools, including Stanford, which is the source of our speakers today. We work really closely with the staff and faculty at those schools on a number of different initiatives, including our annual summit, our MBA fellowship, and the MBA Academy Virtual Learning Series, which you're here for today. If you haven't yet signed up for a mailing list, please make sure you do so you can stay up to date on all of these different events. And I just mentioned our 49 partner schools and wanted to highlight just a few of those schools who support ClimateCAP at the leading and supporting partner level. We want to thank them for making this program and a lot of our other initiatives possible. And for those of you who are interested in learning more about the different programs, you can check out the full list of schools and link directly to all of their websites from ours. Hopefully you've heard of the MBA Summit by now, but this is our flagship event every year, bringing together hundreds of MBA students from around the country to network and learn about climate and business. Our most recent summit was hosted by UC Berkeley Haas in February, and we'll be releasing a lot more details about our upcoming Spring 2026 Summit very soon. Tickets for that summit will go on sale this fall, so be sure to be on the mailing list to make sure you get to know about speakers, the agenda, and ticket sales later this year. But if you're curious about what the event has looked like in the past, we have recordings and the agenda for the past multiple summits available on our website. Next, I wanted to briefly highlight the ClimateCAP MBA Fellowship, which empowers our fellows to become the next generation of climate leaders and change makers. We welcomed our third cohort of 16 fellows back in January of this year. And key elements of the fellowship include learning and development sessions, networking, and a self-directed project work where students design and implement their own climate action projects. And throughout the fellowship, students receive mentorship and also attend cohort building activities. The applications for the next cohort will open in the fall of 2025. So again, be sure to sign up for the mailing list so you can get more information about that program when we're ready to welcome the next cohort. And lastly, I want to plug an upcoming learning and networking session for prospective and incoming MBA students. On May 16th, you can join us for this virtual learning session where prospective and incoming students can hear from business educators about the ways that you can build skills and climate expertise during your MBA experience and prepare yourself to be a business leader that contributes to the climate solutions. You also have a chance to network directly with some of these programs in the ClimateCAP network. Please feel free to share this event. It's a free event with any of your friends who are considering or entering their MBAs, and the registration and more information can also be found on our website. But now to the reason that you are all here today, to hear from Krish, Meghan, and Adelaide. I've shared their full bios on the registration page, so I'm just going to give brief introductions here. Krish Mehta is the CEO of PHNX Materials, a startup decarbonizing concrete by refining landfilled coal ash into clean cement substitute. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with dual degrees in business and engineering, then worked as an engagement manager in McKinsey's sustainability practice and later managed the Model 3 P&L at Tesla. As a Knight Hennessy Scholar at Stanford, Krish earned an MBA from the Graduate School of Business and a master's from the Dorr School of Sustainability. Before going to Stanford to earn her joint MBA-MS degree in Environment and Resources, Meghan Wood worked as a management consulting at Bain & Company in Toronto. Her most fulfilling work came from the relationships that she built between her home Bain office and the Nature Conservancy in Canada. Meghan spent her time at Stanford exploring ways to make a positive climate impact through entrepreneurship, which led to the founding of her current company, Raya Power, making solar adoption like any other appliance instead of a major construction project. And finally, Adelaide Coman is an accomplished entrepreneur, innovator, and community leader who serves as the Associate Director of Co-Curricular Ecopreneurship Programs at Stanford Graduate School of Business. With a rich background in higher education, startup incubation, and community building, she has supported over 300 early-stage ventures and helped countless entrepreneurs explore and launch innovative, sustainable business ideas. Previously an associate lecturer in entrepreneurship at the University of the Sunshine Coast, Adelaide also co-founded a health and well-being solution designed for remote workforces. And with that, I'd like to turn the session over to Adelaide.
Lovely. Thank you, Jessica, so much for those warm introductions and for organising the event. It's really, really important for us to be talking about climate solutions, and that's why everyone on this call is, part of this community. So thank you for your contributions, and just really excited to be able to share the stories of Meghan and Krish and their journey to date, and hopefully their experience may inspire you a little further and you'll take away some new learning. So thank you to everyone. Meghan and Krish, we know a little bit already about your background pre your MBA journey. I'd be curious if we can start with, when did you decide you were going to launch your own venture? Was it before you even did your MBA, during your MBA? If you could start with that.
I can take that first, since my answer is straightforward. I came to Stanford with the goal of starting my own company, and so I was fairly focused, didn't consider too many other opportunities, and so it was primarily heads down building the company.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here. Mine is maybe a little bit less direct in that I had an inkling that maybe I'd want to start something, but I didn't really know what that meant. And I figured that doing it without an MBA would be even harder because I didn't know what it meant. So I thought that using the MBA to explore if I wanted to do that. I was also curious about venture capital. I thought maybe I would join a startup first before starting my own. And so I really used the time at Stanford to actually figure out, did I want to start something or did I want to join something? And there's a couple key parts in my journey there that led me to decide to start this. But I think it's really just one foot after the next. You just keep moving forward and eventually you're starting a company.
Absolutely. So throughout that journey then, whether it was from day dot, Krish, or Meghan midway through, what did you find were the challenges juggling coursework and your MBA commitments with exploring, validating, and then launching a venture?
Happy to go first on this one. Yeah, people had different ways of doing it, I guess. Some founders were sort of, the business was their core purpose of being at the MBA. So, 80% of their time was on building the business, and they kind of did the MBA on the side. Then there's people in the middle, and then people on the other side that just were like dabbling until the end. Because I wasn't sure I was going to start a business, I was really focused on exploring the first year. So taking a bunch of different courses in the MBA, trying out different venture capital opportunities, different startup classes. And so using that first year to explore. Then that summer between is when I sort of tried what idea could I come up with that I'd want to actually pursue. And so in my second year, I tried to focus all of the classes that I possibly could on building sort of the foundations for Raya. So there was a bunch of different startup classes where you got to do customer discovery and customer research. And in those, it was, I guess, a complementary thing where I wasn't trading off school or building something. I could do both at the same time and get credit for it. And similarly, take advantage of extracurricular opportunities that kind of put climate and entrepreneurship and the MBA all together rather than trading them off. But at the same time, it was a lot of work. I remember people saying before the MBA, like, oh, it's just a fun time. Like, I was definitely working hard the whole time. And I think I took that approach of, I really want to pivot into climate and I want to pivot into entrepreneurship. So I'm going to do everything I can to do that. So I definitely was busy, but still made an effort to I didn't want to regret not doing the social things or the travel or different parts of the MBA that make it so special, that I figured, I could always start a company. So as long as I did some of the building blocks that I felt ready to leave at the end, I didn't need to be fully running one yet.
I was certainly not as industrious as Meghan. And I would put myself more on the former category of 80% of my time was spent building the company. 20% was on, honestly, more social events. I was not the best of students, admittedly. Balancing is hard. The MBA has so many different pulls, especially during the program. At least for me, it felt like every single possibility and door was open, and it just came down to how you wanted to spend your time. And so prioritization was extremely difficult, especially during the first year. So anyone who is overwhelmed about that, I think that's a common feeling that resonates across schools and across people. I found balance difficult. I don't think I necessarily hit the perfect balance, except for classes which, as Meghan alluded to as well, helped me build my company. I think it comes down to priorities. I would say my only advice or suggestion would be to folks on the line, just have a sense of what your priority is during the program, because it can be really easy to move in like 15 different directions.
Yeah, sorry, one thing I'll add before the next question, Adelaide, on that is someone gave me that advice early on, and I think the other thing is the more you say your priority to people, the more resources end up like coming towards you for that. So early on, I didn't know what I was doing yet, and I was looking into agriculture and then into hydrogen. And you don't have to exactly know what your thing is yet, but if you choose a thing and talk about it a lot, then everyone will be like, oh, Megan's the hydrogen person, like send hydrogen things to her. So for a good like 6 months, I was like the clean hydrogen person. And then I decided I didn't want to do that. So then I became the solar person, and then people send solar things your way. But I think better is to choose something, like strongly run at it so that resources coalesce your way and you have a better chance of doing that prioritization versus just kind of floating and not putting a stake in the ground, because as Krish said, you end up going in a million different directions then.
Absolutely. There's so many students I often hear, and even from my own MBA experience, there is a plethora of options and pathways and resources, and just knowing what is the right one. So I love your comment, Megan, just like maybe just grab something and then start building community and awareness around that. And I guess the sooner you do that, you can determine if it is or is not the right fit, and through that, maybe pivot to solar or another solution. The next question I had is a little different. I'll just remind everyone on the call to feel free to utilize the Q&A to send through any questions. We'll be opening up to Q&A towards the end of the call for Megan and Krish. But my next question, I'll get you to maybe jump in first, Krish, on this one. So we know climate-focused startups face unique complexities from regulatory or longer R&D development cycles. If you could share perhaps what are some of the key challenges you've experienced as a climate-focused company than perhaps a more traditional startup?
Absolutely. First, just one thing, because Megan brought it up and I thought it was a great point, and just to add on it, I actually think one of the best ways to do an MBA is by starting a company during that period. I say that because doubling down on Megan's point of people putting resources towards you, I think the access you get as a student is quite unparalleled. Speaking as someone who has recently graduated, it's just not the same in terms of resources coming towards you. And so if you are working towards something and people know what you're working towards, the access you have both within your university but also externally is something that it's a special thing to leverage, and you can only leverage it during school. So in many ways, the experience can be more fulfilling if you have something you're working towards. Adelaide, to your question, climate startups are very different than traditional. I'm based in the Bay Area, as is maybe some folks on the line as well. Over here, most startups focus on software-related products or types of AI-related products, depending on the space. It is different. It's a different funding environment. It's a different talent pool. It's a different set of advisors and potential customers you have to speak with. It's also a different set of metrics. I can't think of too many hard tech, so hardware-focused climate startups that have, for example, even recurring revenue, let alone recurring profitability. I would say the most important piece would be to find both investors, but also a team and advisors and an ecosystem that is aligned with what you're working towards, especially in the current administrative environment. I think that's especially important. Just having a sense for the company you're building, and making sure that the people around you are going eyes wide open with regards to both the risks, challenges, and opportunities associated with climate-related startups. And the final thing I'll say is, I've actually found, so I've mentioned or at least alluded to some of the disadvantages, but I will note that there are huge advantages to being a climate or climate adjacent startup today. Namely, my experience was attracting talent was a lot simpler in that there's a lot of people who very much are passionate about working towards something that's mission oriented, and climate is a mission that orients with many. So from a talent perspective, and from frankly just getting folks to want to believe in your mission, I found it to be easier.
Definitely agree with everything you said. Especially on the ecosystem part, it's kind of who you surround yourself with is also influences how you feel about yourself and what you're building. And so if you're building a hard tech climate company and you're talking frequently with software AI founders, you're probably going to feel kind of shitty because you're going to be like, oh, the multiple they got on their investment is huge. And like the speed to which they can make a change on their product is so quick. And like everyone wants to talk to them at this random event here because it's just a general VC event. So that can feel bad until you find the people who resonate with what you're doing and really care about it. And then like you'll just feel that they get it. Like it'll click a lot better. And that's in terms of investors or other founders or other, people at school. And I think talking about your challenges with people who have similar ones just resonates a lot more and makes you feel a lot more like, oh, this is normal. Like, of course I'm going through this thing that a hardware company would go through, that a product development timeline is 6 months, not like a couple weeks, and you're going to put a lot of capex into that, which you can't necessarily get back if you mess up. So bunch of different things there where it's important to be surrounding yourself with the right people and also like going down the right paths to get what you need with the right people. On the positive side, one other thing I would add is non-dilutive funding or different opportunities for programs that doesn't really exist for non-climate startups. So all of the different accelerators like Activate and Breakthrough Fellows or Elemental, like there's so many different ones. I'm not naming them all here, but those are specific to climate and to impact, and those don't necessarily exist to a different startup that's not in this space. And similarly, different types of government funding. So like California, like electric funding and different things there that you can plug into are unique and are worth doubling down on because they don't exist to other types of founders.
Some fantastic points. And I think part of that, I saw the theme of, it's all about who you're around, and that having that theory of change and knowing the impact you're having helps you bring on your team, your advisors, and as a student, being able to leverage, I'm researching and exploring a topic area, but this is the kind of impact I want to have, helps you maybe connect with, researchers that could be advisors and build credibility to your team, but also building the relationships with collaborative partners in the future and alike. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. Coming back to then having the right people around you, what advice would you give to not just identifying, but attracting the right co-founders, particularly technical, because, both yourselves and those on the call are going through an MBA journey. So how do you find the technical?
Yeah, I can start. I know Krish has a lot of thoughts on this too, probably. But I would say there's an interesting vibe, at least at Stanford, where I don't know if like the PhDs necessarily fully like respect what an MBA is doing, and if an MBA fully understands what a PhD is doing. But I think that like bridging those worlds can be super magical in what we can bring from a lab and make a reality and make a business. And I've seen in some of the classes we took where they're sort of like a startup class and you bring together technical and business, some people's PhDs were fully shifted focus because they had this now commercialization view of like, what could we actually bring to market? So in saying that, I think there's a ton of value an MBA can bring to a deep tech science, but there's initially perhaps like an upfront work that needs to be done to build that relationship and kind of prove to each other the strengths that you bring to it. So ways that I think that can be done is just taking classes in other schools. I was lucky enough to do the joint program with the Masters of Science in Sustainable Energy. So I was able to take a bunch of different classes in the science schools and engineering and just meet folks there through different social events that were totally outside of the MBA bubble. And that opens up a full new network to you. Also different professors there I would go to after and say like, hey, I'm working on this. Do you know any PhD students researching this or any master's students I could talk to? So it takes a lot of like your own effort to go and do it because it's not going to be an event that's just like fed to you in the MBA, but at least at Stanford, there was a lot of opportunities to do that if you got out of the MBA bubble to do that. And you didn't need to be in the joint program to take those classes. You could just take them as your elective. So I imagine there's tons of opportunities for that at other schools as well. And that was a really great way to do it. And then, as Krish was saying, to do it while you're at school, like it's hard to afterwards find a group of people who are ready to shift their career to join you because they have to quit a job. You have to give them competitive pay. They don't have time on the side to be like building something with you. So there's a really unique time when you're at the MBA where a lot of people are in a similar life point and have the freedom to maybe choose that next decision, that it's like super valuable to find someone while you're there. I've gone to hardware events afterwards trying to find people, and it's just a much harder sell when you're so early to bring someone on to believe in your vision when they would have to kind of quit their jobs.
Yeah, finding a co-founder is hard. I'd say, one thing that can certainly ease the process in addition to the classes is just trying to put yourself out there. So similar to what we mentioned previously around having a cause or a mission you're working towards and then trying to attract resources. In my case, because folks knew that I was passionate about decarbonizing cement, I was connected with different professors around Stanford's campus that were similarly working with cement. And it was through those connections that I met my co-founder. I will say that to find the right co-founders is extremely difficult. There's sort of 4 criteria that all need to work at the same time. First, you need to have or find someone with the right skills. To some level, that's almost table stakes. The second is you need someone with the right timing. As an example, I had a potential co-founder who was only 2 years into their PhD and therefore wasn't ready to commit to this because they would still have to be in school. Third, you need to have someone who is passionate about starting a company and is willing to let go of, and in many cases, most folks doing the PhD plan to go down an academic path and sort of let go of basically their life plans to pursue something with you. And then fourth, you have to actually like them. And all 4 are frankly quite difficult. I'd say the 4th one is the most difficult to solve around, again, because you're probably coming from many different disciplines. It is extremely, extremely difficult. It requires a lot of effort and trust on both sides. And it's a process that is, frankly, easiest to do in school. But I wouldn't expect you to like nail it while in school. It's an evolving journey as opposed to a one and done.
Yeah, and maybe to that I'll add, it's kind of linked back to what we said earlier about just keep talking about your thing. Like my co-founder and I didn't start working together until after school, but I had met her at a friend's wedding while I was at school. And I had just been talking about solar and how cool it was. And someone at the wedding was like, you should talk to Nicole. Like she loves solar too. So at this wedding, we're talking about solar. And when we got back, she was also at Stanford, but in a product design program. We went for coffee and it was like, cool, yeah, like let's keep in touch. And then a year and a half or 2 later, I was like, Nicole, you still interested in this? You want to do this? So it's the random things you won't think about, but it wouldn't have happened if I didn't keep talking about the thing I was passionate about at that point so that people know to send those resources your way.
Absolutely great story. And yeah, it is definitely, as the theme throughout is just constantly putting yourself out there, kind of wanting to just everyone in your circle to know that you just want to learn as much about this space, and that demonstrates the passion for bringing on those people as well. I guess we've touched about the pros and the cons. At any point in your journey, did you think, should I consider a full-time job, or do I just go all in on this and just start growing my startup as soon as I graduate?
Like every day, no. Yeah, I mean, when starting a company, it's not the easiest because to have a successful startup, you have to be in this unique intersection of doing something that no one else is doing, but you also have to be right, as opposed to doing something no one else is doing because it's just a stupid idea. And so you're often going to find, especially during the early stages, a lot of good feedback, a lot of good criticism, which is healthy. By definition, what you are working on is something that is extremely difficult, and most people don't think makes sense, because if it did, others would do it. So there is, I was certainly tempted at least to say, hey, maybe this is not the right thing to be working on, and it's probably time to go back to a stable, more reliable job. So yes, the temptation exists. Again, this is another reason why I think trying to start something during an MBA is awesome, because it's basically risk-free. My perspective was, let me try to get something off the ground during school. And worst case, it doesn't. And then I graduate with an MBA degree, and that's great. So it's a super risk-free time. It is difficult. I think the most existential time I had was, it was similarly during the summer of my first and second year. And there's the whole thrill of like starting your own company and so on. But I found myself in an apartment in New York over the summer. It was super small because it's New York. I had the lights off because I'd been working since early morning. And I was just sending emails, and I spent over like 2 hours drafting an email to someone. And I just had this like moment of reflection, being like, is this what starting a company is? Just sending emails in the dark? Like, that is so not the glamorous pitch that people talk about. But that's honestly like 90% of the job.
I love all of that. Yeah, some maybe similarities, and so sorry if I repeat some of them, but the temptation is real, like you were saying. Like, you have all your MBA classmates leaving to very high-paying jobs, and you're like, "Ooh, great! I'm gonna leave and have like barely a salary." So that is hard, and just seeing them, like the first 6 months, I didn't have a salary, and I was grateful for programs like loan forgiveness if you were working on an impactful startup, and different programs Stanford had to make that doable. So definitely, I was a super user of resources at Stanford. Like, try to see everything you possibly can and talk to the people who run those programs like Adelaide to see what's available to you, because without those resources, I wouldn't have been able to have the extra time I needed. Like, I wasn't ready to raise venture capital when I graduated, but I also didn't have a salary then. So all of these incredible programs that existed to give you funding in different ways were what let me continue to do this. But yes, the reality is there. I remember early on checking LinkedIn and being like, jobs in clean tech. And like, now I don't do that anymore. So it's cool to see the transition. Like, early on, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of what the hell am I doing? Like, I don't know if this is the right choice. And now, like, I've gotten to a point of there's no other job I'd want to do. Like, yes, this is hard, but I'm so loving the journey and learning everything, and like the coolest opportunity to get to do this, that I actually haven't checked LinkedIn jobs in like over a year, so that's great. But for sure, the uncertainty's there at the starting. I think some of the other things for me where I had worked at, so I thought I was going to work at a startup for a bit after school before starting my own thing, because I was like, I should learn more about how a startup works. But then I interned at a startup and was like, no one knows how anything works. Like, the people running this one know as much as me, and they're just taking a bet. Like, obviously they have more experience in different things and more years of work, but I think at some point just realizing like, you know as much as the next person in the thing you're excited about. And I was like, 18-year-olds do this all the time and just start companies. Like, I should try. So kind of to Krish's point of, once you've already gotten to an MBA, your backup plan feels already so privileged, like so lucky, that I was like, why shouldn't I try to do something impactful and hard? And it's, yeah, not an easy startup to run. It's not a software. It's like hardware and for low, moderate income people. But like, I'm in such an incredible privileged position, having done my MBA at Stanford, that like I can get another job. So I should try, I guess, was a bit of my mentality. And so that was there. And one of my advisors while I was at Stanford, she was like a year or two above me, and she's starting a company. Her name is Marissa. She was like, well, is this something you want to do for the next year? Like, just decide if you want to do it for the next year. You don't have to decide if this is your like 10-year career, because I think it's really hard to choose that. And I was like, yeah, I mean, if I could get paid to do this for a year, that's incredible. So I think making it smaller decisions for yourself is also helpful, of like, I'll do it for a year. And now halfway into that year, you're like, oh my God, okay, I'll keep doing it. Or you decide it's horrible and you go get another job. Like, as long as you've done your work, I guess, at the MBA, building that network and relationships and showing that you're trying hard, I don't think there's a negative to trying. No one's going to penalize you for having tried something in the space.
Particularly because a lot of the skills that you're acquiring through that process are still, they're soft skills and transferable, which is only perhaps going to create a unique value proposition, worst case scenario, if you were to go and apply for a job and what you bring to the table there. But often many of the students, because there's an abundance of resources while you are a student and there's so many choices, we often encourage students to reach out to like career advisors within the school to help them navigate not just what their choices could be upon graduation, but even what resources, you know, the institution may provide. So for those on the call, you know, if you're deciding, how do I want to have impact? Is it as a corporate innovation, you know, is it a chief sustainability officer, or is it a ecopreneur? Sometimes, yeah, just reaching out with career advisors can help you ask reflective questions to help inform that, but also understand the resources available from your school and your community to make a more informed decision and support you on that journey. I guess if we're to transition now, and just a reminder for those on the call, just to utilize the Q&A, I want to shuffle a little bit now to life since graduating. What has been the biggest lesson for you since leaving student life, being an MBA student, to now running a business in the real world?
Also, sorry, I was just noticing one question in Q&A is more like pre that, but should we get to that after, or?
It was just for letting everyone know like where we're transitioning to, but to utilize Q&A, yeah. Okay.
Life after. You want to go first, Krish?
Oh man, I was gonna say this is a tough one. So my experience during the MBA was magical. I loved it. Similar to Meghan, I was doing a second master's in School of Sustainability, which gave me more time on campus, and I loved campus. Campus is like this beautiful place. Post school is not the same. In many ways, you get downgraded, I suppose. What I mean by that is, as a student, the people I had access to were, let's say, the chairman of the boards or the CEOs of the prospective customers that I was trying to work with. And it was pretty either easy for me to either find an introduction or cold email even a lot of these people to have a chat with them. And then the minute I'm no longer a student, I'm sort of working with, you know, some associate or like manager who is maybe making time for me over the next month. Like, it's just a totally different dynamic and a power dynamic really in terms of where you fall. So post MBA or post school life is just different. I'd say the flip is now I just a lot more focused. It's a lot easier to spend all my hours building the company as opposed to other priorities which I had, which could be social, which could be learning, which could be networking. Biggest learning, I'm finding myself use a lot of the skills I learned during the MBA in my job, which honestly, I don't know if I expected to use them this early, especially the soft skills. I would say like 20% of my role is some version of conflict resolution or mediation or prioritization amongst my team. I think doing the MBA helped me prepare for those soft conversations a lot better. I don't think I would have been as qualified or equipped of a manager as I would be without the support and the education during the program. So I think from that perspective, it's cool to see a lot of the learnings that I have getting translated over. And then Adelaide, just to build on something you mentioned regarding the role of an entrepreneur, I would say the entrepreneurship job is by far my most fulfilling and all-encompassing role. I'm using basically everything I've ever learned in all my previous jobs, previous education, all in one. I find it extremely fulfilling. I also expect that it's going to be it's going to be viewed extremely positively, even if, let's say, things don't work out with my company. I feel quite strongly that I should have a pretty soft landing as it relates to jobs out there, because there are a lot of people who see value in founders.
Things to add. So yeah, I think when I left, it became real. Like while you're doing the MBA, for me, it was like, oh, I'm starting something, but it wasn't until it's like, oh, okay, well, I have no salary now. So like, do I really want to do this? Like, is this what I want to spend my time doing? And having all your time to do it. It also is this weird space of figuring out your own productivity and where you want to work. And is that like co-working or at home? And how do you find the right I guess like accountability metrics or partners or people to connect with to create the structure you don't have anymore as a startup. For that, the MBA is awesome in terms of we have like a, founders group chat of people who are founding companies who've left. And one, just like reaching out to people there for shared experience, but also anything you need, like what are you guys using for accounting software, or how did you do this, or how did you structure your safe investment? Like that is the most useful group of people who are all going through either like a few months ahead of you, a few months behind you, but like dealing with the same problems. And everyone answers that one immediately. Like it's such a helpful group chat. So wouldn't have had that before the MBA. Also my first round of financing, I raised a pre-seed round, is honestly majority MBA connections I made, like while I was at Stanford, either through the MBA or the sustainability school. So having that network being built while you're there, as Krish said, is incredible. Like there's no way before I would have gone from Bain Toronto to raise money from any of these people or have credibility to build like a climate startup. So making sure you build that network, the credibility while you're in school is super, super valuable. Even if you're not certain on like the final idea. I know that's one of the questions in the Q&A, but I started in like manure management and then hydrogen. But those people I met at the starting are still people who are kind of cheering me on now. And so it's not the exact idea that matters. It's that you want to do something and your character and the way you show up. Sorry. Yeah, what else is different about being in the real world? That's mostly all I can think of right now, but yeah, I love it. Like Krish said, it's the best job I've ever had. Oh, I guess that was the last thing I was gonna say. I saw a post that said like, I'm not looking for a 9 to 5, I'm looking for a 24/7. And I thought it was a cheesy post, but at the same time, like when it's your baby that you're building, it doesn't really feel like you're working long hours. It feels extremely different than working hours at Bain that I didn't want to be working in the middle of the night versus building my own thing. I'm like, every hour I can put into this is advancing the thing I want to see in the world. So that really changes the mentality.
Absolutely. Particularly, if you know that theory of change and the impact that you want to have, and just knowing that, yes, spending 2 hours sending emails in the dark is moving the needle a little bit closer to that impact I want to have on the world. And yeah, just that sense of pride you get knowing that you're getting closer and closer to it. For those that are on the call, they're all generally current MBA students. What advice would you have for them if they're considering launching their own venture?
Just do it. Again, I think we've talked a lot about both downside protection and like upside of doing it during the MBA. Downside protection, where worst case you graduate with the MBA, you will still have the friends, resources. In many ways, you probably have more resources because you've put yourself out there. And I'll give you like a super tangible example. I found it extremely easy to find time with professors around campus, in addition to external folks around the area, just because I had a super specific ask, which was, hey, I'm building this company, I need help with X. As opposed to if, for example, I didn't have that company and I didn't have that ask, it tends to just be more difficult to get time with people who are otherwise extremely busy for just a generalized coffee chat. So just from that perspective, in many ways, it's a no-brainer. And the upside being, of course, you can leverage all the resources on campus to move forward and create the idea that you want to see in the world. I think the tough part or the tough piece there is twofold. One is one of the questions, which is how do you know when you have the right idea? So maybe we can. I'll just address my perspective on that one, which is you don't, or at least I didn't. I should rephrase. I had reached a stage with the idea that I was working on where, like, 50% was saying this is a great idea, and then 50% was saying this is a stupid idea, and there was no real way to build any more conviction because I had already spoken with everyone I could think of. And I just had to pull the trigger and say, okay, I'm gonna run with this till it breaks down, or it doesn't and it takes off. And thankfully, in our case, it took off, but it could have very easily have not. So I don't think there's a good way to make that decision. And then the second challenge is, at least for me, both the mental block of like, oh my God, I need to I want to start something, but then also the temptation to like go back and do a full-time job. I think that was very real again, especially during the early days. That's just something that I don't think there's a right answer there. I mean, each person has to look at their own circumstances for what makes sense, but just know that everyone goes through that doubt of is this the right thing to be doing?
And it's a reoccurring thing. It's not just at one point you're like, and they make the decision, it's easy. It's just even during that journey, you're still.
Yeah, especially initially. And I will say if it gives people hope, that disappears over time. Like right now, I mean, Meghan mentioned this too. Like I have not even not in the past year, probably not even questioned it. But before that, it was definitely a question.
Love it. A few more things I would add. One is, I feel like some people while we were there, and even myself, would say like, oh, I'm not a founder. And like, you may have an image of your head of what a founder is, like what someone would be to start a company. And I think I would encourage you to try to squash that, in that a founder is just someone who's like taking a risk on trying something and on maybe looking really stupid. And I like was at an accelerator we did, and at the end, just watching everyone go up, like, regardless of the idea, I just felt like this immense feeling of pride of like, everyone here is just taking a risk on looking stupid, because the upside could be really cool, but you also could just, yeah. And so I think anyone can be a founder, and it's just someone who decides to try something. And especially if you've already made it to an MBA, you're smart people who have a lot of, you've already motivation, I guess, to apply to an MBA, to go do that. Like, just try if you're excited to try. What was my other thing? Oh yeah, on the right idea. Similar to what Krish said, I didn't have an idea that I knew I wanted to do from the start. I approached it a little bit like a consultant, in that I did make a like matrix of what are all of I took the GHG pie and wrote out every industry, and what are all the problems in that industry, and what are things that excite me. And then I scored them all based on things that mattered to me. So I wanted tech that was like close to commercial. I wanted a market that like I was close to the customer I cared about. So all these different things. And that gave me a list of like 10 things. So then I just chose one and would try that one thing and saw if I was excited by it, by the customers, by what I was learning. And it gave me some type of structure to something that's otherwise unstructured. But a little bit of is serendipitous as well, as who you meet and what idea randomly comes up, or ideally what you've worked on in the past and have like a good story that it makes sense for you. But I also think you can build that in different ways based on the team you build around you. The third thing I wrote down, oh yeah, the going back. It's like going back to a high-paying job. That part is hard and real, and I also don't think there's any like fault in saying financially my family needs a job right now and it can't be a startup founder. Like, this is a hard job and you're probably not going to make a lot at the starting, and that's like a real personal question you have to ask yourself and your family and whoever of like, is this the right time for me? The way I looked at it is like, I'll never have less responsibility than I do now as someone who wants to build a family, and starting at kind of like zero again after an MBA felt easier than getting a high paying job and then having to quit that to try to start something. I was already in like a student mindset of like frugality and stuff. So just different things in your life to think about as well of how this fits into the broader picture.
That's some really great advice. We'll transition to Q&A in about in 2 minutes. So for anyone on the call, if you have any other questions, please utilize the Q&A function down the bottom for us to come to, and we'll start going through those in a couple of minutes. Just beforehand, I have a couple of questions for you, Meghan and Krish, as just a quick little lightning round. So just quickly blurt what comes to mind. I'll ask the question, I'll go to Krish, and then to Meghan. So Meghan, you get a little bit of a heads up at least. So first question, if your startup was an animal, what would it be and why?
That's just not fair for me to go first here.
I have one. We're a lion. We're like self-sufficient, and the yellow made me think of sun and like strong, and that you can have your own energy.
I have no idea. I'd like to think we're a sloth. I say that because our vision is to build a company that is going to be long lasting. It is a very slow moving industry we are a part of, but we're going to make a change.
For some reason, as I asked it, I was like, oh my God, Krish is so easy. It's a phoenix because you're phoenix.
Oh my God. Yes, Phoenix. Right.
Second
You can
question.
tell that I lack the creativity.
No, but I think the sloth is, it is slow moving. You are in cement. It's a very traditional industry as well. So, awesome. Well, the second one, what's your go-to activity or ritual for just bouncing back after a tough day as a founder?
Honestly, just speaking with my wife, which comes back to the piece around family that Meghan was talking about. Super important if you do have a family, to just make sure you're all aligned with what you're working towards, have clear expectations on both ends, and just have those hard discussions up front.
Yeah, I was gonna say either my boyfriend or friends, and not talking about work. Something totally different.
Okay, and last one, if you describe your startup life in one emoji.
The one that does this. I feel like most things that happen, I'm like.
That's a good one. I would say I don't have an emoji, but there's days where it's like a rocket ship, and there's days where it's just like a puddle, and literally the days could be one after the other. And it changes every single day.
So yours is a series of emojis: rocket, puddle, puddle, rocket, puddle.
That's right.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Krish and Meghan, for just being so candid and sharing that. We'll hand it over now to the Q&A. We've got a couple of questions. So thank you everyone for joining us and sending through some great questions here. I'll jump in, and we've got one. We touched a little bit on it, but the question from Elizabeth here is, what roles did groups or networks that were part of the alumni group help you in your progress? Did you join like green or climate focused networks, general startup ones, and were they great sources? Were they great for access to resources and funding?
I would say I tried some like accelerators that weren't climate focused, and I didn't find them as helpful just because the resources and sort of mentality wasn't the same. So the more climate focused ones were more helpful. I'm not like in anything that's like a core climate group now, other than, again, we have this huge group chat from school that's a bunch of like climate alumni, but kind of like maybe 2 or 3 years above and below us in that group chat has been really helpful to get resources. Yeah. Krish, did you join anything else?
Yeah, I'm a part of the Activate Fellowship. I think that's been really special. It's a group of folks who similarly are working on climate hard tech products and companies. That's been extremely helpful. but I would +1 Meghan in that non-climate related groups have been very not helpful, and to the point where it's frankly been a distraction.
Another question we have is, how did you define and craft your startup idea? What were some of the key insights that made you think a difference in the early days when it comes to customer discovery, product market fit, etc.?
One thing I remember is being scared early on to send like a random email to someone or a random LinkedIn. Like that just wasn't something you would do in the normal world before an MBA. And then a huge push in a lot of the startup programs was just like cold email people, especially using your school email, message them on LinkedIn, say you're doing a research project, because like at that point you are. And so getting over the fear of that is one step. And then once you do that, it's this like power you've unlocked and you're like, whoa, people answer me and get on a call with me. And now you talk to these experts who've been in the field forever. And so that just helps you test a bunch of different ideas. Like, how would you think about this or why this? And doing a ton of problem discovery before you try to come up with a solution is what helped me refine mine.
Yeah, I think just talk to more people and be open to unexpected ideas.
I think, and they're great points, because when you go in with a bit of a solution first, you've got your blinkers on, which kind of means you're not hearing all the other signals that could be going on in the market, and yeah, just staying curious and asking questions. But yeah, the imposter syndrome certainly comes into play very early in that piece. You know, so just having the confidence of just going out from curiosity to ask questions. I loved your point around that, Meghan. What are from Amanda, what are some of the best planning tools for very early stage business ideas?
I don't know if it's a tool as much as just an approach. Well, I'll start by saying planning is extremely helpful. Now, there's different ways to plan. There's certainly the business model canvas, there's theory of change. There's different types of tools that exist. Admittedly, I don't think I found them as helpful, but like specifically the structure. But what was helpful was thinking about those questions and then crafting my own structure over what I believe the answers were. So my answer is I don't think there are necessarily like tools that will like specific frameworks or tools that necessarily get you there, but having a framework, whatever that is for you, is certainly helpful. And the best way to build on that framework is to go out and talk to more people.
I love it. One thing I was thinking about, just because part of planning may be team as well and who you're going to work on with this. I think the other part that we didn't really mention, the co-founder part, is maybe just be aware that, you know, who you work on with this with the MBA may change over time, who actually wants to start a company and who doesn't. And so just being very clear on what your goals are and what's expected while you're working on these different projects at school is really important up front, so that you're all sort of on the same page as you go to graduate. And in that planning, yeah, I agree with Krish. I've probably gone through a bunch of different tools and tried different practices, and I'm like replanning again for our business. And I don't know if I have a perfect one yet. Sometimes I just use PowerPoint and like my own charts of how I'm going to get there. I've tried like Miro boards and Notion and really formatted things, and I struggle to keep up with them. And so find the thing that works for you. Not great advice, but I don't know if there's a silver bullet.
Last question, just before we wrap up, and this is just any general, I think we've touched a little bit on it, but this is going into more the prototyping. Is there any general advice you would share for developing a prototype?
At least for us, we started with this huge vision of how cool our product could be and like all these bells and whistles and things that would be incredible. But we really tried to like push on the brakes in that, okay, that's cool, but what is version 1 that we can get together as soon as possible to learn a bunch from? Because if we design what we think it should look like, but we haven't tested any of those things, we may waste a lot of resources, especially when it's hardware. It's hard to like spend time designing and producing something custom that you don't need later. So we tried as much as possible to just use what's off the shelf, what can we 3D print, what can we get really quick and scrappy to get in a customer's hand. and like be careful who that customer is so that, you know, you're getting the right feedback and you're not like burning a bridge for future with something that they expect to be a commercial product. But if you have the right people who are aligned with what you're trying to learn, that's, we found the best way. Like we fully shifted the way our product works now over the past 2 months of just putting in a first version with customers.
Yeah, we focused on the pain point. So we found an extremely niche but very real pain point that was facing the entire industry that we were working towards. And from then, it became pretty simple to define the prototype because it just had to address this one small, one extremely big pain, but very small, narrow topic. And we built our entire solution around that. So I think identifying the pain point was the most useful thing. And from there, it almost became easy.
It's actually, you're reminding me of a feedback we got too from one of the founders of D-Light, who does like small scale solar products in Africa. And he was like, find a specific customer and solve their specific need. And like, it feels painfully niche. Like Krish was saying, you're like, am I really solving for like this random home in rural Africa? But if you can solve that specific problem and know that there's more people that look like that, rather than solving something that works for everyone, apparently it's a good strategy.
Well, Krish and Meghan, thank you again for just being so candid and sharing your journey as a student and now as a founder. And you're just incredibly thankful that we have people like yourself, you know, that are doing great things and are having impact in the world. So thank you again, and I'll hand it over to Jessica.
Wonderful.
Thank you.